All right, I think I'm back. Let's see. Okay. Refresh this. Let's see. Oh, shoot, I'm low battery. Give me 1 second. I'm going to go get my battery. I will get this better organized. Okay. Now I am charged and ready to go for at least a little while. So let's see if we have anyone watching. Okay. Hey. Hi. Sorry that I was not here. I forgot my charger. So tonight's live stream, I'm sorry for it's like super bright. I put up one of those lights because my dining room light is very, very dim. I just wanted to update you personally. Last time I live streamed, I was not feeling well. I was having a bad day. And I had like a sore throat, and I was really honestly kind of nervous that I might be sick. And then my husband finally convinced me to take a Claritin. And I took a Claritin, and I felt completely better the next day. So if you're worried that you have coronavirus symptoms, take a Claritin first and see how that goes. So I just wanted to update some of the numbers that we have in New Jersey on coronavirus. I'm not, information is coming from a lot of different places, but it seems like it's a little hard to get stuff compiled. So I just wanted to run through those quickly. In the United States now, we have 25,000 cases, 176 people have recovered, and 314 people have died. So when I first started following this virus back in January, when it was unfolding in China, something that really struck me was that the number of recovered was always really, really low, which is indicative of the fact that this disease keeps people sick and bedridden for a really, really long time. And in addition to that, there are people who seemingly recover and then test negative and then sometimes test positive again, which indicates that the viral load persists for a long time. So the fact that we right now have more deaths than recovered in the United States is typical of what we were seeing in China in January. So that's not very surprising. But given that there's overall 25,000 cases, that does mean that there are a lot of people who are currently sick with the illness. And these are, of course, mostly people who are hospitalized or were serious enough to seek medical help. In New Jersey, we have 13 official cases. In New York, there's now almost 12,000. It went up to 11,727. And given how people go back and forth between New Jersey and New York, I think the New Jersey number is actually a lot higher than that. Here in Bergen County, which is the epicenter of the disease in New Jersey, we have 363 cases confirmed. There was a drive-through testing center that opened at Bergen Community College yesterday, and both days it was filled to capacity basically as soon as it opened. My understanding is I think they had 350 tests available to give people, and after 35 minutes they were done for the day. Essex County has 107 cases reported. Hudson has 97, which I think is probably severely undercounting the number there who have it. Union has 81 and Morris has 64. So that's just a general update. If you are aware or not aware of the numbers currently in New Jersey or haven't seen them compiled by county. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is something that came onto my radar probably 2 or 3 weeks ago, which was the potential promise of the drug hydroxychloroquine in use to treat this disease. And there's been a number of studies that have come out about this. I think that the idea that this drug, particularly in conjunction with azithromycin, might be helpful in treating this disease has been percolating more and more into the mainstream. And in my opinion, I've read the studies, I read the in vitro studies, I read the in vivo studies, I read the study from France, which does have limitations because it was obviously a very small sample size. But in my opinion, it's clearly very promising. I think that there's a really good chance that we're going to see this be very useful in stopping this pandemic in its tracks. when I think about this and I read the papers on this, it seems to me that if we had gotten together and tried to find the perfect cure for this as quickly as possible, it would have been hard to stumble upon something better. The combination of the hydroxychloroquine and the azithromycin together seem to have a profound effect. At least from the French study, it seems that 75% of the people recovered, and they recovered within 6 days. They were completely free of the viral load, which is huge because it means that we would be able to test asymptomatic people, treat them with this drug combination, and basically cut down on the not social contagion, but community spread really quickly. Instead of being asymptomatic for weeks, people would be asymptomatic for 6 days. So you have a confirmed case, you test all the people that they've been in contact with, and you catch those asymptomatic carriers. I think that this has the potential to cut down the spread of the disease dramatically. In addition to that, because both of these drugs have been on the market and are very well vetted in humans, it means that we can start using it basically immediately. As soon as they can start manufacturing the drugs at the level that we need, doctors can start using it as in treatment. I know that right now the FDA is saying that they're not sure about the side effects and they have to look into it. But the reality is, I don't know that this is true, but my understanding is I think the doctors could probably prescribe this off-label almost immediately if they thought that this treatment would help. And I know that if I were in the hospital and with COVID-19 and I were sick, this is the treatment that I would request my doctor to administer to me because there's real data behind it. There are a lot of people saying this. I know one of the people saying this is the president, but I think that we can often look to the markets to see if something is real or not. And right now there's every indication that the market believes that this is going to be something that works. So you have a number of pharmaceutical companies who have redirected resources so they can start producing the hydroxychloroquine. I'd never heard of it before this. I'm not even sure if I pronounced it correctly. But when you have Mylan is one of them, for example, Mylan announced several days ago that they were going to ramp up production of this drug. And when you have pharmaceutical companies who are looking at the science and saying that it's worthwhile doing this and they think there's going to be money in doing this, it's a really good indication that we're looking at something real. So to me, this is excellent news. I'm really happy about it because I think that it means that our worst fears about what could happen with the pandemic are not going to come true. I think the light is at the end of the tunnel. And I think the tunnel is a lot shorter than we expected it to be. And that's a really positive thing. So I feel optimistic. The prediction that I'm making is that the next couple of weeks are going to be really hard because you still do have the community spread. We're completely underestimating the number of cases. There's still a lot of asymptomatic people who are walking around. The hospitals will still be overwhelmed, I think, for a while, particularly in larger areas. But once that drug is up and running, and if the FDA doesn't stand in the way of it getting out, I think we're going to see recoveries happening really quickly, and people who might have otherwise progressed from moderate to severe forms of the illness stay at moderate and get better, which will alleviate some of the burden in our hospitals and on our healthcare workers. So I think by April 30th is about the date when we should be looking at probably going back to normal. That's my hope anyway. I think that probably makes sense given the timelines of the disease. And also the fact that Mylan had said that they'd be manufacturing a high enough dose to treat 1.5 million people by the middle of April. So with that in mind, I think that's where I'm getting the April 30th date from. So that's my hope, is that April 30th, we're sort of breathing a collective sigh of relief after what will probably be a couple of very difficult weeks from now until then. So then the next question is, what happens to the economy? Assuming that we're able to get the pandemic wrapped up, assuming that maybe this isn't a miracle drug that cures 100% of the people, but it makes a big enough dent that this is no longer a pandemic, what happens to the economy? And I thought about this a lot. I've talked about this with my husband, who understands economic issues far better than I do. I've discussed it with some other people, and it's hard to see that this is going to have a really long-term impact on the economy because ultimately it wasn't something structural. It was a crisis that caused a very acute contraction in the economy. It'll certainly be reflected, at the end of the year, but nothing has so fundamentally changed that we won't be able to essentially go back to somewhere close to where we were. There will be small businesses, I think, will be the sector of the economy that is primarily affected. But I think restaurants and other businesses that are being affected right now will likely be able to get back into the swing of things, hopefully, by mid-April, when people are starting to realize that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and into the spring and summer. That is assuming that some of the government measures that have been put forward right now to help support small businesses, to help support tenants in residential buildings get through this tough period. I think that assuming that those safety measures are put in place for those people, so that they don't lose their home, it's not very disruptive. Things are just kind of status quo. It's sort of almost like we sat out for a month and a half. Assuming that all that goes through, that's also part of the basis for saying there'll be a minimal impact on the economy in the long run. Something else, I know I'm like rushing through this, but I'm actually really tired and want to go to bed. But I also feel like I want to get this out. Before I move on to the next topic, which I want to get through really quickly, which is Murphy's executive order, which I read, highlighted, and have some thoughts on. I'm just going to go check to see if anybody has made any comments. And I think I have this running on a couple of places now. I'm not sure if it's on Twitter. So I'll check there too. Oh, let's see. I got to find a better way to set up the comments so that I'm not jumping around. See, this isn't even loading up. Let me try this. Thank you for bearing with me. That's not running. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next topic while these pages are loading up. So Phil Murphy's executive order, something that has been sort of like at the back of my mind for a couple of days now, since things started getting really serious with different governments shutting things down and telling restaurants to close, has been, where is that line between where the government's allowed to act in the interest of public safety, where the state is permitted to act within its police powers, versus the liberty that we all hold, recognized by the United States Constitution. And I don't think there's really easy answers to this. I see a lot of people nowadays, like if you raise a civil rights issue, people are like, well, obviously, they're allowed to do whatever they want in order to protect us for our own safety and this sort of thing. But nobody's really been able to cite to me where that authority comes from. And I can't find any basis for it anywhere else in the Constitution, in the New Jersey state statutes. In my opinion, there's a lot of interesting civil rights issues that are being raised by the government actions right now. And I think that it behooves us to be mindful about the steps the government is taking and whether it is government overreach or not. So generally, I think that the ability to close restaurants, to regulate what hours restaurants are working, and those sorts of things do fall within the government's general power of policing and to protect the public health and that sort of thing. Where I really start to get concerned is when you have the government saying that people must stay within their homes, that people are only allowed to travel within certain periods of time, and limiting people's ability to leave the state. Because freedom of movement and freedom of association are explicitly guaranteed in the Constitution and are generally considered some of the most important rights that we have. And there are definitely freedom of association issues that are raised by all of the government's actions. Since the freedom of association is found in the First Amendment, it means that for the government to enact a law that infringes on our freedom of association, they must show a very compelling purpose to do so. And so any analysis of whether the government's allowed to do this would be a fact-intensive analysis as to how compelling is the government's reasoning. And I see a lot of people just saying, well, of course it is, because there's this pandemic going on. But the reality is that when a court analyzes an issue like that, there's no of course it is. It really is something that requires serious consideration. So because I'm always thinking in this manner of the Constitution, when I first read Phil Murphy's order and heard about it, it concerned me. And so I did go through it, and there are just some parts that I do want to raise to you. And if you're not familiar with the order, then you can learn a little bit about it here. Before I jump in, I am going to just hop over and see if I was able to come up with any of the comments, if anybody is commenting. No comment there. Okay. Page. Okay. All right, so Phil Murphy's order, this is Executive Order 107. It follows on 2 or 3 other executive orders that he's passed. One of them was invoking his emergency powers. And there was another one that was actually rescinded by this executive order because that just limited the ability of restaurants to operate within certain hours. This executive order also references administrative orders issued by the State Director of Emergency Management that place restrictions on businesses. I'm not sure what administrative orders those are. I looked it up and wasn't able to find it. So that's something that's interesting and I'd like to know more about. So the order does a couple of things. It instructs all of state employees to be able to work from home. This is people who work for the state, to be able to work from home, both essential and non-essential wherever feasible. And one of the things the executive order does is it goes through and it talks about what's essential and what's non-essential. And that seems pretty typical to me. I don't think there's much to say about that. However, temporary closing all non-essential retail businesses in order to prevent community spread of COVID-19 in New Jersey. The executive order says it is necessary to limit the unnecessary movement of individuals in and around their communities and person-to-person interactions in accordance with CDC and DOH guidance. DOH is the New Jersey Department of Health. And so the executive order, like all government resolutions or executive orders, goes through a series of whereas clauses, and then it has resolution clauses. So the whereas clauses here are basically talking about the CDC guidance, what the CDC has said, talking about the fact that he has already invoked a state of emergency through prior executive orders, talking about social distancing. Social distancing is referenced a lot, and the need to stay within 6 feet of other people. And then it goes into the resolution clauses. So the first resolution clause, which I think is the most concerning, states all New Jersey residents shall remain at home or at their place of residence unless they are, and then it has a number of exceptions, which includes obtaining goods or services from essential retail businesses, which are described in a separate paragraph and include things like banks and supermarkets, restaurants for takeout and delivery, and just a handful of other businesses. You're allowed to seek medical attention, essential social services, not clear what that is, assistance from law enforcement or emergency services. You're allowed to visit family or other individuals with whom the resident has a close personal relationship, such as those for whom the individual is a caretaker or romantic partner. I think that this clause is really obviously in violation of the First Amendment. I think if it were challenged in court, it would never, ever be found constitutional. I can't imagine any circumstance in which the government's able to say you're not allowed to visit people, to associate with people. There's no more important rights than those under the First Amendment, and you can only infringe upon them in the most dire of circumstances. I don't think this would pass muster in a court. Number 5 is reporting to or performing your job. You're allowed to go walking, running, or engaging in outdoor activities with immediate family members, caretakers, household members, or romantic partners, while following best social distancing practices with other individuals, including staying 6 feet apart. I think this also raises First Amendment issues. You're allowed to leave your home, leaving the home for educational, religious, or political reasons, which is interesting. That's the purpose of that clause, is to take it outside of the reach of the First Amendment, but it ignores the fact that they're infringing upon freedom of association in every other respect. So it's an interesting issue. Or number 9, you're allowed to leave your home if law enforcement or another government agency tells you to leave your home. Paragraph 3 of the resolution clauses states that when in public, individuals must practice social distancing and stay 6 feet apart whenever practicable, excluding, and it has a number of reasons. I think it's kind of funny that the second reason is going to a pot dispensary. You're allowed to go to pharmacies, medical supply stores, and convenience stores. The retail functions at gas stations are still open. So if you go to get gas, you can still go in the store and get whatever they're selling there. Hardware and home improvement stores remain open. Banks and other financial institutions, laundromats and dry cleaning services, stores that principally sell supplies for children under 5 years old. So if you do like baby supplies, pet stores, liquor stores, car dealerships, but not to buy cars, only for auto repair services, printing and office supply shops, the retail functions of them, and retail functions of mail and delivery stores. Those are the only stores that are permitted to remain open. There was one more. Okay, and then it goes through categories of stores that must remain closed. This includes recreational and entertainment businesses. He closed the casinos. He closed the racetracks, places of public amusement. So like places where you would take a kid, like a Lily and Liam type place. Libraries are closed, etc. So this is just going, I think that all this is perfectly fine. I don't have any issues with how he defined essential versus non-essential businesses. The schools are to remain closed. However, they did work into this executive order that they want to make sure the kids who are dependent on school lunches or school breakfasts are still able to get them. And also left room for case-by-case basis, I guess, if a kid needs one-on-one attention or something like that. One other thing that I find interesting and a bit concerning about the executive order is it delegates to the state director of emergency management the ability to determine and control the direction and flow of vehicular traffic on any state or interstate highway, municipal or county road, any access road, including the right to detour, reroute, or divert any of the traffic, and to prevent ingress or egress from any area in the state director's discretion, as is deemed necessary for the protection of health and safety and welfare of the state. So this has been delegated to the state director of emergency management, which I don't really have a problem with, because that seems like, I don't know much about it, but that seems like the title to me that I would expect to be able to do that. However, those same powers are also delegated to the AG, the Attorney General. And I have a little more difficulty understanding why such broad powers of prohibiting people's movement and the ability to use public roads would also be delegated to the AG. And also curious what would happen if there is a disagreement between the AG and the Director of Emergency Management. So one of the questions that immediately comes up from this is, okay, so what happens if somebody violates it? What happens if somebody says, screw it, I'm leaving the state, or I'm leaving my area, or I'm going out at whatever time, or I'm going to play basketball with my buddy? What happens? And this is not in the executive order. This does reference New Jersey statutes, and I didn't have time to look up the statutes, but I did see in an article in the Princetonian that it would be treated as a disorderly person offense, which is a $1,000 fine. And so it's not peanuts. I mean, this is something that and I believe that you can also detain people for a disorderly persons offense. So the executive order has real teeth in terms of being able to prohibit people from leaving their homes. I'm not aware of any other circumstance in which the government has invoked that sort of power to prevent people from leaving their own homes. The country has gone through really, really serious things. I mean, I feel like 9/11 was a really serious thing, and there was no talk of anything like that. I'm kind of alarmed by how easily people are going along with this. And I'm also alarmed that I don't think that the government, in implementing this executive order, has really talked about the balancing of civil rights and the ability of people to move freely, and the fact that this executive order infringes on that, and it's indefinite. That's another thing. Like, if you're going to make an executive order like this, and you're going to make the case that this must be done, it's absolutely vital for the health and safety of people. Like, all right, make it a 1-week order. Don't make it an indeterminate thing until the governor revokes it. I think that this, to me, and I want to stress, I'm not someone who has been skeptical about coronavirus. Like, in fact, I've been pretty well panicked throughout the entire, I don't want to say panicked, but I took it very, very seriously for a long time. So much so that, like, I went out and bought my beans and stuff in February. I actually started social distancing a week before everyone else was talking about social distancing, because I was very, very scared of it. So I'm not someone who's like, oh, it's not a big deal, so this isn't necessary. I think it is a big deal, but, I'm always reminded of the maxim. Was it Jefferson who said, those who trade security for liberty for security deserve neither? Franklin. My husband tells me it was Franklin. So, it was Benjamin Franklin. Okay. But in any event, so this to me is trading an awful lot of liberty for security, and I'm very, very concerned. I remain concerned about the precedents being set here. I will be curious to see if anyone challenges this on a legal level. If anyone does receive a disorderly persons offense or anything like that for violating the executive order, I hope that they will call my law offices, because I'd be really interested in discussing the case with them. So that's all I want to say about Murphy's executive order right now. I did have one more topic that I wanted to cover, which is, it's sort of touching back on the hydroxychloroquine and the azithromycin looking like a very, very promising treatment that I feel really optimistic about. I really feel like this is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's still going to be a difficult few weeks, but I think that this is going to be something that's ultimately very good. But I'm trapped in this bubble on Facebook where I joined all the coronavirus groups and started following them, and people there are really freaking out. And at first I was vibing with that because I was totally freaking out. But now this good news came out, and I'm like, all right, this is still freaky, but I'm actually feeling a lot better, because I feel like this is going to be a very good treatment. I think that the pandemic is going to be basically stopped in its tracks between the combination of the fact that we're moving into spring and summer, and we now have this treatment, which, by the way, we don't even have a treatment for flu that's that good. Like people who are like, oh, this seems like a very good treatment, very, very promising based on the papers. But the thing is, there's just so many people that don't seem to want it to actually be a treatment. It's very strange to me because as I'm sort of going through social media, there are people like, stop saying that. You're giving people false hope. And it's so weird because I feel like if we were living in normal times where the best information was filtering through to people, that people would be feeling like me, like cautiously optimistic about this. And that it seems that something is happening that might be, I'm sorry, it's kind of like a pop up, something that might be good. And I lost my train of thought because I got the pop up. But in any event, so that's just something that I sort of noticed. And I see a lot of people who are like, oh, you don't have false hope. This isn't good. You can't believe anything that President Trump says or whatever. And to me, that's very sad. I think that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and it's perfectly good at this point to be feeling cautiously optimistic. Brace still, because I think we're going to have a couple of hard weeks, but cautiously optimistic, both about beating this disease and also having an economy that recovers from it within maybe 6 months to a year. All right, with that, I'm going to sign off. I feel so weird doing these live streams, but whatever. I'll try it out and see how it goes. Thank you very much for tuning in. Have a good night. I guess I should check to see. I don't think there's any comments. If there are, I'll answer them in the comments. Have a good night.